Hello, Steve White, Steve Arts 89. Well, the Acolyte. Um, this is always going to be divisive. It started off well on some levels, well received by some people, not by others. But then it kind of went a direction people didn't want. Even the people who were supporting it sort of gave up and turned on it and basically said, I can't defend this anymore. And then it was cancelled. And there were a lot of fans who, I don't know if they liked it really, or if they just liked what it represented and where they thought it was going to go and where they thought it would go if it got a second season. I think people are more defending its potential than it's the actual show itself. But the other issue is just the reality of it. The Chuds are all loving it, of course, because they hate it, and they, there are people who are racists and bigots and homophobes and everything, and they would have hated this show no matter how good or bad it was. But they didn't have to make up a bunch of lies about it being poorly written or not delivering, because from what I hear from the actual fans and objective critics, it didn't. It wasn't great, and it didn't. And like I said, I think a lot of people who are defending the show and screaming for a second season are sort of hoping for what the show could have been, and sort of I think that's what's happening. But what they should have done and what they could have done was they could have just simply catered this show, knowing that, they did with the writing and everything, but budget-wise, this show cost $180 million apparently for 8 episodes? That's unfathomable, the amount of money they spent on that. I get that Star Wars is a big production, but it doesn't need to be. A lot of these scenes can just be Jedi sitting in rooms talking. You can just build some sets and film it like you used to in the old days, just on sets with people, and just accept it. Well, we can't afford to have, whole rooms full of ships and spacescapes and big city settings outside windows with ships taking off and stuff like that. Sometimes you just can't afford that. You just have to have a wall. That's what they're doing Next Generation, and that show was very economically made, profitable, and is still making money for Paramount Pictures 30 years later. This show won't be. And just as a gay man, I understand for representation, I have to watch a lot of cheap films that are not very well made because they don't have the budget, because Hollywood knows there's a limited audience for gay films. They will make films for us because they know there's an audience for them, but they know that it can't spend much money because they're not going to make much money. Star Wars needs to do that. If they're going to cater for different elements of the fans and the fandom, they need to actually budget accordingly. If they're going to do a show that's only going to appeal to a section of the fan community, they need to make the show very cheap so it doesn't have to rate as well, and they can get a second or third season. They didn't do that. For some reason, these people, they must be delusional, thought this show that we're doing that's so great, that's only catered to some people, everyone's going to watch it and love it, and it's going to be a big hit and make a bunch of money and justify its huge budget. They couldn't have thought that. They must have just been so arrogant to think that, of course, they're going to make my show because it's important, and even if no one watches it, as long as a few people watch it who are important, they'll keep making it because I matter or something. I don't know how this show got made, because they had to have known it wasn't going to get views, and they had to have known that if it cost a lot of money, Disney wasn't going to make a second or third season because the first season didn't get views. And I just don't understand how this happened. It's stupidity, and all the Chuds are celebrating and happy and all that, and they're right about a few things that Disney is about making money. They're not going to make a second season of a show if it's not making money. So the only way to get around that is to make the show cheap in the first place, and plan for those sort of things so you can cater to just some elements, some parts of the fan base. And if you want to speak to certain demographics and talk about certain issues, you can do that, but you have to do that in a way that you're still profitable and relevant, not cost the studio like $100 or so million, and then you basically say, oh, my stories about minorities and so forth and diversity, they're not profitable. So that's not going to encourage Disney to do that in future, or anyone to do that in future. So you're kind of hurting us overall. So yeah, it's just been a disaster all up. And it's been interesting to see people talking about and arguing about. I don't watch many Judd's anymore. I do still watch Star Wars Theory, and I watch a couple of his videos just about this. I don't watch them regularly. And I couldn't disagree with much of what he said, a few things here and there, but for the most part, they spent too much money. They didn't cater. They didn't plan to cater to how they would I'm trying to find explanations for how this happened. I don't understand how they did this because it's so obvious it was going to fail hard, and give the Chuds exactly what they wanted, and that's worse. That's like the worst outcome, and that's what they ended up delivering. So had they just made an economical show for less money, knowing it was going to have a smaller audience, they could have justified their existence and probably got another season or two and got to go further with the story and everything, which is what a lot of people are pushing for, not because the show was good, but because they think it can be, and maybe it could have been. I would have liked to have seen, but